Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this results presentation. This study came about actually after a conversation with a client. You know, as Agility, we do lots of digital advertising, and we're always benchmarking our own client results. But they asked, well, what about the rest of the sector? And we thought, well, actually, that's a very, very good question. So in January, we launched this study asking other people to participate and give us their information. We had a lot of people take part, which was fantastic. And for that group, we gave the results pre-Easter. And this is allowing us to share to the rest of the world. So yes, Liz, next slide, please. So today,
sorry, clicked too early.
Two presenters. You have myself, I'm MD of Agility, and Liz Dimes. Liz Dimes is our digital marketing director, and she heads up all our digital advertising and is the best person to speak to about the results and how to interpret them. Next. Just a quick word about us and who Agility are. If you don't know, we are marketing specialists for the visitor attraction sector. A lot of what we do is digital advertising. All our clients, bar one, use us for digital advertising. Some also use us for websites to optimize their websites or to build their websites. A lot use us for strategy. And then we also have social and content creation as our fourth sphere. But we are full service, actually. I know there's a handful of clients that we do everything for. But on the main digital advertising, which is why this study was so important and interesting to us. So, as I mentioned, we've had a really good spread of attractions taking part. A really, really good spread. Can I have the next slide? Yeah. And so we do have a lot of animal attractions, zoos and children's farms, but we also had theme parks, family entertainment centres, and it's great to see that museums and heritage attractions also participated. And then we had a few attractions in the mix that we couldn't really place anywhere, so we had to put them in other. But it wasn't just the categories that we had a good mix of. We also had a really good mix across the various sized attractions, from those who were really small, under 10,000 visitors, to those that are in the high, very few percentage of the total attraction mix of over 1 million. And then the bulk of the survey was completed from those between 50,000 and under 500,000. So yeah, I think it really is a representative, good spread of responses. So I'm going to kick off with the easy bit. I'm going to kick off with two or three stats, and then I'm going to hand over to Liz, who's going to go into the detail. So first of all, everyone always wants to know is what platforms was everyone using? And unsurprisingly, Facebook and Instagram came out on top. Interestingly, one respondent only used Facebook. But on the whole, most people these days are using Facebook and Instagram. And then Google Search and Google Performance Max were the next two. Google Search, 68%. And then dipping down to Google Performance Max, which is essentially Google's display network, is 60%. And then right at the bottom, we had TikTok and YouTube. The Performance Max network does actually show videos on YouTube, but people who are doing standalone YouTube was 36%. And the average spend across the platform, as you can see, if you top these up, people are spending, I would say, a significant amount of their budget on digital advertising. And Meta was the biggest spender with over 20,000, above 20,000 was the average spend across the whole year. So that would be spending it on school holidays, and then some people were filling it in with always on activity. Google Search was the next barrier, the 10,000 to 20,000 spend. And then Google Performance Max and TikTok were at the same amount of spend. But with Google Performance Max, you can get a hell of a lot for your money. And also on TikTok, actually. So you don't need a lot of money to make significant results in those areas. And I think I'm going to hand over to Liz
Yep.
now, who's going to go into the devil's in the detail, and Liz is going to share that.
Yeah, so we're now going to look at the breakdown between the platforms of how people were spending on them and how people were, what the results they were getting, and therefore what the benchmarks are across the industry. So as Anita just showed, the average spend, one thing I think we haven't actually mentioned is all these results are based on a full year for 2024. So we asked everyone to complete the stats based on the 12 months in 2024. So that's where this is all based. So as Anita mentioned, the average spend was above 20,000. There's a number of people spending 10 to 20 and then a few spending a bit less there. But with 96% using Facebook and 94% using Instagram for ads, that's a lot of spend. That's a big chunk of everyone's budget focusing on Meta. So then we looked at the click-through rate. So when we looked at this, we refer to the click-through rate as what Facebook or Meta would call link clicks. So if you just use the standard reporting tools on Facebook, they will give you the result for all clicks. Now, as much as this is great to look at, really what you're aiming for with your ads is to get people to your website, to get people to book, to get people to engage with you. So when you're looking at these KPIs and these benchmarks, when you're comparing to yourself, please make sure you're using the link click metric as opposed to the all click metric. We did go back to a few people where we saw some unusually outstanding results. We double checked whether they were all clicks or whether they were link clicks, and all of them came back and we worked out actually they were all clicks, so we got the link click range for them. So the average here is between 1.1 and 1.5%, as you can see, with basically 30% of respondents achieving that as an average for their year for their Meta campaigns, with the next being 0.6 to 1%. I think if you haven't delved much into digital advertising and you think, oh, what else am I going to get? Oh, 0.6 to 1% of people are going to get to my website. It can sound a bit daunting and a bit like you're not going to achieve much. But anything around 1% and above on a digital advertising campaign from this kind of perspective is really good. So do sort of pat yourself on the back if you're achieving something like that. So then moving on to what the average cost for those clicks is. So again, we checked with everyone that it was link clicks rather than engagement clicks. So the average cost here across the board for the year was between 25 and 50 pence, with a close second of 11 to 25. So if you're achieving anywhere between 11 and 50p, you're within the benchmark, really. You will get some that cost slightly more, and you will get some that cost slightly less. You know, if you're getting an under 10p for an ad, you know, you've probably done quite well with it, but just check that does result in a good click-through rate, and it's not only had 10 impressions and got 1 click, so it looks like it's worked really well. Sometimes it's best to have a look at that if you're seeing something that's out of the usual. One thing I did want to highlight here is you might be thinking about your results and thinking, oh, perhaps they're not as good or perhaps they're much better. One thing, when you're setting up a campaign in Meta, the first thing they ask you to do is to give it the objectives they want you to achieve with your ads. So if you've got your conversion tracking set up and you're choosing a sales campaign, a conversion campaign, then the algorithm is going to focus on getting the cheapest conversion for you, which will probably mean that your cost per click is higher and your click-through rate is lower, but your cost per acquisition should also be lower. Whereas if you are just doing traffic campaigns, that is focusing on getting you the most clicks to your site and therefore the cheapest clicks to your site. So you'll probably see a lower cost per click and a higher click-through rate there, but you might see a higher cost per acquisition. I would always suggest do a mixture of both, depending on who you're targeting. Target the people you know with your sales campaigns, target the people you don't know with your traffic campaigns, and then get a mixture of both to look at your results based on these benchmarks. One thing we were really surprised about was that 44% of the respondents aren't tracking their sales data in Meta. we really, really think it's a huge opportunity for those who aren't to do that. Not only because it helps you measure your ROI of your ads, also because it really helps the algorithm. As I say, if you're not tracking your conversions, you can't allow the algorithm to aim for the type of person that's going to convert on your website. So you're really missing out on that there, and also missing out on that data, especially when people are spending over 20,000, or more than half of the attractions are spending over 10,000. It's a lot of budget to put there and not know whether it's working for you. So when we removed our client data, when we added our client data in, this did reduce down to 30% because all of our clients can track their conversions through Meta. So I know there are some ticketing platforms that make that very difficult, but most of them it does work. So if you want to ask any questions about that, please feel free to email me afterwards.
I just want to reinforce that. I mean, that was a stat we were all quite surprised at. And I think, if people are spending, even if you're spending £5,000 on advertising, it is really important you find out. And if you don't know how to do it, then just find somebody who does, to set that up for you. Because, as I say, it helps the algorithm, and it really kind of helps you justify why you need more budget to the budget string holders. So yeah, be good to know.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to highlight that before I then moved on to looking at the average cost per acquisition. So just to highlight, these are based on a transaction taking place. So it's not per ticket, it is per transaction. It's every time someone gets to the thank you page of a purchase on the attractions website. So as you can see, that 30% have put cannot track. But then the average are getting between £2.50 and £5, but really between £2.50 and £10 per acquisition. And if you think about what your average order value is, which does really depend on which part of the attraction industry you're in and your prices and stuff, then you can quite easily work out from that data what type of return on investment you should be getting, return on ad spend. But it's good to see that it really shows. And also, one of the things we also like to highlight is, as much as we really push and promote people to have their tracking, since all the privacy updates, you're not seeing it just physically can't report on every transaction that takes place from your ads, because a number of people have blocked your tracking. But we sort of modestly think you're seeing at least 20% of it. But either way, you're comparing like for like within your own, with these benchmarks and within your own results. So you'll know how you're doing compared to a previous campaign, or you can use this to compare to. But yeah, on average, people are seeing a cost per acquisition of between £2.50 and £10 in Meta here. So moving on to Google search. Here, the average attraction was spending between 10 and 20,000. There were a number who were spending over 20,000. We had a look at this data and we could tell quickly that at least 30% of them were charities. It may be slightly more. And so we are going to assume that the reason they're spending more than the average is because they are using the Google grant. For those who don't know, Google have a search grant. It is just for search campaigns, where you can receive up to $7,000 per month if you are a registered charity. You have to be accepted. But if you are a registered charity and you've not yet looked into that, then have a go at getting that, because it's free ads, really. You have to do the work and you have to achieve certain results to be able to continue with it, but it's worth having a look at. The other thing I wanted, before I move into the stats here, I wanted to highlight is, when you are doing Google search campaigns, are you negative keywording? Are you excluding your brand name? So the average attraction will, if you search for your brand name, you should be coming up the top. If you're not, if you're having a problem with your SEO, or you've got a competitor who is very naughtily targeting your brand name, then that's maybe a reason to do so. But otherwise, if you're not excluding your brand name, you will be probably not realizing you're targeting your brand name, because the algorithm will go for that if you're using broad match. So do have a look at that, because that that will affect your results. They'll inflate your results hugely, because you would have been achieving those clicks and those conversions for free if you weren't targeting them. So looking at this, there's a lovely 40% who are achieving over a 15% click-through rates. And then the next one is between 5 and 8%. Obviously, I don't know, but I do think it's possible that a number of the people in the 40%, in the 40% who are getting, sorry, I'm saying a lot of percentages, in the big chunk of people who are getting over 15%, there is a chance they are targeting their brand names. As it then dips straight down into the 5 to 8. So I think if you're getting over 5%, you're doing well. Obviously, with search, it's a really reactive, it's rather than a push, it's a pull. So someone is actively typing something in that you then want to be seen for. All the other platforms are pushing at them rather than them pulling in. So it is a very different type of ad and a very different platform. And depending on the keyword, it can be more competitive or less competitive, and therefore cost more or be harder to get a higher percentage. So with that saying, when we look at the cost per click, the average is getting between 11 and 25 pence. So it's a slightly cheaper cost per click than Meta, which is nice. But this can really vary depending on the keywords targeted, particularly locations in the attraction world. Some locations are a more expensive word than others. So as an example, one of our clients is Black Gang China in the Isle of Wight, and the term Isle of Wight is more expensive than other locations. London, unsurprisingly, is more expensive. So it can vary, but that's quite a strong benchmark to aim for there, with 62% seeing between 11 and 25p as an average. And then just looking at their cost per acquisition, again, this is based on a transaction rather than a ticket. It's a bit more spread here than it is in Meta, but again, the average is between £2.50 and £5, with the close second of between 5 and 10. But some are achieving less there where they weren't in Meta. But again, this will decrease, your cost per acquisition will decrease hugely if you are intentionally or unintentionally targeting your brand name, but you would have been getting those conversions for free. So please do check that you've got your brand name as a negative keyword. So we also ask people for their results for their display and performance max campaigns. We have combined them because they're very similar, and the majority were using the Performance Max, but some weren't. Just in case any of you that don't know Performance Max, effectively it's Google's AI of advertising. They can put your ad on any of the anything that Google own, basically. So it can go on YouTube, it can go on search, it can go on the display network, it can go on Gmail ads, it can go on their discovery, it can go in the maps, it can basically go anywhere, depending on trying to get to the ideal target. So we did a lot of testing of this when it first came out, and we'd really recommend, if you are doing any display or YouTube broken down cost, unless you've got a specific reason to, there might be a specific placement that really works for you, then we would recommend moving over to Performance Max. However, what I would say is it is meant to work alongside your search campaign rather than instead of your search campaign. The percentage that goes on to search your budget won't go anywhere near what it would on search. So, and you really want to get that, as I say, you really want to get that pull rather than that push as well. So just to back into the brand names, with Performance Max, you can't add negative keywords. So you do have to do it in a different way. In your Google ad account, you can set up a brand list, which you can give it your URL and your brand name, and therefore you can then choose to exclude that from your Performance Max campaign. So that will make sure that you're then not within there, you're not unintentionally targeting your brand name. So the average spend here was slightly less, at between £1,000 and £5,000 across the board. And then from a click-through rate percentage, there's a much higher percentage at under 5%, but then there's also a really high percent on over 15%. This is really interesting actually to see. This is the biggest sort of spread I think we see across any of them, that in Performance Max it's a real spread of results. Partly this might be down to how much how many of the assets people are supplying. So Google, when you're setting it up, Google really push you with give me your headlines, give me your descriptions, give me your images, give me your videos. But if there's certain bits that you don't include, you will see a lower result. So just try, if you are setting it up, just try and make sure you're putting in as much as you possibly can. And then from a cost per click thought, it is the same as search, actually, with the average being between 11 and 25 pence. Although there is slightly more in the 25 to 50 pence than there was in the search. It's not quite as big a percentage of that, but it's a good, I'd say that's a good benchmark to aim for, between 11 and 25 pence for a cost per click. One thing I would say that I haven't put here is when it comes to Performance Max, we've kept it as cost per click because some people are using display and YouTube here separately. But when you are looking at your results in Performance Max, as well as looking at the cost per click and the click-through rate, have a look at what they call the interaction rate and the cost per interaction, because your ads are going on YouTube as well and other areas where a click isn't always the result. So if it's gone onto YouTube, the result you want is someone to watch the full video and engage with it. And that won't be included in your just click results. And then for a cost per acquisition, again, this is very similar to search, actually, with the majority at £2.50 to £5, and then an exact average to 1 decimal point between £1 and £2.50 and £5 and £10. Again, depending on whether you're targeting your brand name, and intentionally this could range a bit. So again, just have a check of that when you're setting that up, or if you've already got them set up, just check that that's in there. And then the last platform we're going to talk about is TikTok. TikTok's platform is still learning and growing, particularly in the UK, as opposed to the US. So for quite a while, the geographical targeting was terrible. They have improved it quite a bit in the last year. So you still can't use postcode targeting. However, you still have to choose out of the towns and cities that TikTok think exist in England and in the UK. But it used to be about 20 and there's loads now. So if you thought you couldn't target there in your location, go back in and have a look, because it may be that where you want to target is now there, to make it viable. And it still is the lowest cost per thousand we see across all the platforms. So we did have, at the beginning, when we asked people if they which platforms they used last year for advertising, over 40% said they used TikTok, but then none of them wanted to tell us how much they spent, I think, because they said 75% said they spent zero. But of those that did, the average was between 1 and 5,000, so the same as Performance Max here. And then the click-through rate percentage is lower than the other platforms. But I think really the reason to be on TikTok is to make sure you're getting the awareness out there, especially for those in your target market who aren't using Instagram and Facebook and they're searching elsewhere outside of Google. They are potentially, if they're doing that, searching in TikTok. So if you're not on there and you're not advertising there, you're potentially missing that market. But it's still, to be able to get nearly a 1% click-through rate, that's still great. And then to get that click, it costs slightly more than the other platforms at 26 to 50 pence. Even more people can't track on TikTok. We weren't as surprised by this, because tracking on TikTok is very hit and miss still. The platform still, and the pixel still doesn't work as well as it does for the Google platform and the Meta platform. However, I definitely have noticed a difference this year compared to last year, that more are starting to work. And it is technically as simple as putting the TikTok pixel on your site and on your booking pages, and then in the back end of TikTok setting up the event. But it is harder than the other platforms, definitely. So of that small percentage that could, the average we're achieving between £5 and £10 cost per acquisition here. And then the last thing we asked people were, what are they going to do for this year compared to last year? So we asked, what are you going to do with your digital advertising budgets? And 45% said they were going to spend between 1 and 10% more, and then the next set were spending between 11 and 20% more. We're still looking into this more, but there's a lot of research out there that suggests that to achieve the same number of impressions in Meta in 2025 as you did in 2024, you're going to need to spend 4% more. The average cost per thousand is expected to rise by 4%. So if you have decided to spend the same or less, you may well see less impressions and therefore less clicks onto your site, but just keep an eye on it, I would say. But it looks like the majority of the respondents that took part in the survey are spending more this year. So that's all the data for you. It's a lot. We will, as I say, we're recording this, so we will save that and upload it, and we'll send it out to you all so you can look back. There's also a PDF that you can download to look at it, so when you're looking at your own results you can refer back. Has anyone got any questions for us? You can either say or
put in the chat. Now, I'm conscious we just blinded you with numbers, so it's all someone's difficult to take in and absorb.
Can I ask, do you have any more detailed breakdown based on the average footfall? So, for example, the average spend for, well, we've got 250,000 footfall.
Do you want to pick that up, Liz, or shall I?
Yeah, actually, it's one of the things we plan on. We wanted to get this data out to everyone as soon as possible. So we've got this far, but we are in the background looking at the data in more detail, and that is at the top of our list of the next things to look at. So because you signed up to this webinar, you'll be on the list to receive any extra information that we do. So that absolutely will come at you, but I don't know it right now, Steph, I'm afraid.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, well, we'll leave it at that for everyone. But if you do come up with any questions, feel free to drop either myself or Anita an email, or just send us a LinkedIn message if easier. We're happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you a lot. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.